The words tumbled out before Julian could stop them. "Mom, I can't bring a girl home because I'm seeing someone. His name is Carter, and he's my boyfriend." The crowded living room in his parents' suburban Chicago home fell silent, forks hovering above half-eaten slices of apple pie, while his mother's eyes widened in genuine shock and his father's jaw tightened like a vice. Carter, sitting right beside him on the worn leather couch, squeezed his hand once in silent support, and that small pressure sent an unexpected jolt through Julian's chest. It was supposed to be a quick lie to survive the annual family reunion, nothing more, yet the second Carter played along with that calm smile, everything shifted. Julian had known Carter since their freshman year at the University of Illinois, back when they bonded over late-night study sessions and cheap pizza in the dorms. Carter was the steady one, the graphic designer who always showed up with coffee during finals and listened without judgment when Julian vented about work deadlines at the marketing firm. They had shared an apartment in Lincoln Park for 3 years now, splitting rent and chores like any two straight-acting best friends, even though Julian had carried the secret of who he really was for as long as he could remember. His parents, first-generation immigrants with deep Catholic roots, still asked every holiday when he would settle down with a nice girl and give them grandkids. The pressure had only grown worse after his sister announced her engagement. So when his mother cornered him in the kitchen earlier that evening, waving photos of her friend's daughter, Julian panicked and dragged Carter into the spotlight. Now, surrounded by aunts, uncles, and cousins who stared with a mix of curiosity and confusion, Julian forced a laugh. "We've been keeping it quiet. You know how work gets crazy." Carter nodded smoothly, his dark hair catching the warm lamplight as he added, "Yeah, but we figured it was time to stop hiding." The words sounded so natural coming from him that Julian almost believed them himself. Inside, his mind raced. What had he just done? Carter was straight, or at least Julian had always assumed so. They had never crossed that line, never even joked about it. Yet here Carter was, playing the part perfectly, thumb tracing small circles on the back of Julian's hand like it was the most normal thing in the world. The rest of the evening blurred into forced smiles and careful stories. Julian's father pulled him aside on the back porch, the cool Chicago night air carrying the scent of grilled burgers from earlier. "You sure about this, son? A man like you needs stability, not complications." Julian swallowed hard, the weight of years of silence pressing on his chest. "I'm sure, Dad. Carter makes me happy." It wasn't entirely a lie. Carter had always made him feel safe. But happy in that way, the thought lingered like an uninvited guest. When they finally escaped to the car, the silence between them felt heavier than the city traffic humming around them. Back in their apartment, Carter dropped his keys on the counter and turned, arms crossed. "Okay, Spill. How long are we doing this?" Julian sank onto the couch, rubbing his temples. "Just until the wedding next month in California. One weekend, I swear. I'll owe you big time." Carter studied him for a long moment, green eyes unreadable. "Fine. But we need ground rules. No weird stuff, and we practice so it looks real." They spent the next hour mapping out their fake history. First date at a Cubs game, inside jokes about burnt toast, even a pretend anniversary. When Carter reached over and gently took Julian's hand again to test the gesture, the touch lingered a second too long. Julian pulled away first, heart hammering. That's good enough for now. Days turned into a careful dance. At work, Julian dodged questions from colleagues who had heard rumors through the family grapevine. Carter texted daily check-ins, sending silly memes that made Julian laugh despite the growing knot in his stomach. One evening, Carter suggested a practice dinner at their favorite Thai place on Clark Street. "We should look comfortable in public," he said. Over pad thai and spring rolls, they talked about everything except the lie itself. Carter shared stories from his latest design project, eyes lighting up when he described the colors he was playing with. Julian watched him, really watched, noticing the way Carter's smile crinkled at the corners and how his laugh filled the small booth. A strange warmth spread through him, unfamiliar and terrifying. This was supposed to be fake. Why did it feel like the most real conversation he had ever had? That night, back home, Julian lay awake staring at the ceiling while Carter slept in the next room. The favor had been meant to buy him time, a shield against his parents' endless expectations and the quiet judgment he felt from society every time he scrolled past another coming-out story that ended in heartbreak. But now, with Carter so willing to help, Julian wondered if he was dragging his best friend into something neither of them could control. The apartment felt smaller, the walls closer, and for the first time, Julian questioned whether his secret was protecting him or slowly suffocating the man he was becoming. Carter's steady breathing drifted through the thin wall, a reminder that their friendship had always been the one constant in his chaotic life. He just hoped he hadn't ruined it with one desperate sentence. The following weekend brought their first real test. Carter suggested they attend a mutual friend's barbecue in Wicker Park to practice, in front of people who didn't know the full story. Julian agreed, nerves buzzing as they walked side by side down the tree-lined street. Carter slipped an arm around his waist casually, the gesture so effortless that Julian almost forgot to breathe. Their friends greeted them with raised eyebrows and teasing cheers. Finally, "We always knew you two were more than roommates," one said, clapping Carter on the back. Julian forced a smile, but inside panic swirled. Carter leaned in close, whispering, "Relax, I've got you." The words sent a shiver down Julian's spine that had nothing to do with the cool evening breeze. As the night wore on, laughter and stories flowed, yet every time Carter touched his shoulder or met his eyes across the fire pit, Julian felt the line between performance and something deeper blurring just a little more. By the time they headed home, the city lights reflecting off Lake Michigan in the distance, Julian realized the lie was no longer just words. It was starting to feel like the beginning of a truth he wasn't ready to face. The weeks leading up to the wedding flew by in a haze of careful planning and stolen moments that left Julian off balance. Carter threw himself into the role with surprising dedication, suggesting weekend dates around Chicago to make their story airtight. They strolled through Millennium Park, fingers loosely linked while tourists snapped photos of the bean, and Carter would point out cloud shapes in the sky like they had done it 100 times before. "See that one? Looks like the logo I designed last month," he said one sunny afternoon, his laugh easy and warm. Julian nodded, but his mind raced. Each public touch, each shared glance, chipped away at the wall he had built around his feelings. He told himself it was gratitude, nothing more. Carter was sacrificing his weekends for a friend in need. That was all. One rainy Thursday evening, they practiced in the apartment again. Carter insisted on rehearsing a goodnight kiss for the wedding. Families notice these things, he reasoned, standing a little too close in their small kitchen. Julian's pulse quickened as Carter stepped forward, hands gentle on his shoulders. The kiss was light, just lips brushing, but the spark that followed was anything but pretend. Julian pulled back quickly, mumbling something about needing water. Carter didn't push, but the air between them had changed, charged with questions neither voiced. Later, alone in his room, Julian replayed the moment, heart pounding. He had spent years convincing himself that his attractions were a phase, something to bury under work and family duty. Carter, with his steady presence and quiet strength, was cracking that foundation wide open. The flight to California for his sister's wedding felt like stepping onto a stage with no script. Carter sat beside him on the plane, flipping through a design magazine, while Julian stared out the window at the patchwork fields below. "You okay?" Carter asked softly, bumping his knee. Julian nodded, but inside the anxiety built. His entire extended family would be there, expecting proof of the relationship he had announced so impulsively. At the hotel in San Diego, they checked into one room with a king bed, another necessity for appearances. Carter offered to take the couch, but Julian insisted they share. "It has to look real," he said, voice tighter than he intended. That first night, lying inches apart in the dark, neither slept much. The ocean waves whispered outside, and Julian wondered how long he could keep pretending when every breath beside him felt like home. The rehearsal dinner brought the first real test. Julian's mother pulled Carter aside near the ocean view patio, her smile polite but probing. "Tell me, how did you two really meet?" Julian never mentioned anyone special before. Carter handled it gracefully, weaving their real college friendship into a romantic tale that had ants sighing. Julian watched from across the room, chest tight with a mix of relief and something sharper, like jealousy at how easily Carter fit into his world. Later, during the toasts, Carter slipped his hand into Julian's under the table. The gesture was simple, supportive, but it sent warmth spreading through Julian's arm. He glanced at Carter, catching a soft smile that made his stomach flip. This was getting dangerous. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, the California sun painting the beach ceremony in golden light. Julian stood beside his sister as she exchanged vows, but his eyes kept drifting to Carter in the audience, looking sharp in a fitted suit. During the reception, they danced to a slow song under string lights, bodies close in a way that felt inevitable. "You're doing great," Carter murmured against his ear. Julian closed his eyes for a second, letting the moment wash over him. The scent of salt air mixed with Carter's cologne, and for the first time, the lie felt like a gift rather than a burden. But doubt crept in too. What if Carter was only being kind? What if this was all one-sided performance? Back at the hotel after the reception, exhaustion and champagne loosened Julian's tongue. "Thank you for today. I don't know how I'd have gotten through it without you." Carter shrugged off his jacket, rolling up his sleeves. "Hey, that's what friends do." The word friends landed like a quiet punch. Julian wanted to say more, to admit the confusion swirling inside him, but fear held him back. Instead, he changed the subject to the flight home, and they fell into easy conversation about work and weekend plans. Yet when the lights went out, Julian lay awake again, listening to Carter's breathing. The weekend had been a success, the family convinced, and off his back for now. So why did the thought of returning to their normal life in Chicago feel like losing something precious? Monday morning back in the apartment brought a new layer of complication. Carter's phone buzzed with a text from a mutual friend who had seen photos from the wedding online. "Dude, you and Julian? For real?" Carter showed it to Julian with a wry smile. "Guess the rumor mill is spinning." They decided to lean into it a little longer, posting a casual photo on social media to keep the story alive. As Carter adjusted the angle for the shot, arm around Julian's shoulders, the camera captured something genuine in their smiles. Julian stared at the posted image later, heart heavy. The comments poured in, full of support and surprise. He should have felt relieved. Instead, the weight of the deception pressed harder, mixing with a growing realization that his feelings for Carter were no longer fake at all. The days settled into a rhythm of quiet intimacy. They cooked dinner together, watched movies on the couch with Carter's head occasionally resting on Julian's shoulder, and navigated the occasional family call where Julian's mother asked about the boys' plans. Carter never complained, never pulled away. If anything, he seemed more attentive, bringing home Julian's favorite coffee on tough days at the office. Julian found himself looking forward to those small moments, his identity crisis deepening with every shared laugh. He had always defined himself by what his family expected, by the safe path of silence. Now, with Carter so close, that definition was crumbling. The societal whispers he had ignored for years, the pressure to conform, felt louder than ever. Yet in the quiet of their apartment, with Carter's presence filling the space, Julian began to wonder if pretending had accidentally shown him the man he was meant to be. One evening, tension finally surfaced. Carter came home late from a client meeting, loosening his tie with a tired sigh. "Long day?" Julian asked from the kitchen. Carter nodded, then hesitated. "Listen, if this is getting too much for you, we can dial it back. I don't want you feeling trapped." The words hung between them. Julian set down the spoon he was holding, turning slowly. "It's not that. It's just complicated." Carter's eyes searched his face, patient as always. Neither pushed further, but the unspoken hung in the air like the steam from the simmering pasta. That night, Julian dreamed of the beach in California, of Carter's hand in his without any audience, and woke with a clarity that scared him more than any family confrontation ever could. The fake boyfriend arrangement was working too well, and Julian wasn't sure he wanted it to end. The misunderstanding hit like a sudden storm on a clear Chicago day. Julian had just finished a long meeting at the firm when his phone lit up with a message from an old college buddy who had seen the social media posts. "Bro, you and Carter? Thought he was straight. You using him to keep your folks happy, or what?" The words stung, twisting Julian's stomach into knots. He stared at the screen in the elevator, the familiar lobby blurring around him. Was that what people thought? That he was manipulating his best friend for cover? By the time he reached the apartment, doubt had taken root. Carter was already home, sketching at the dining table, but Julian couldn't shake the accusation. He set his bag down harder than necessary. Did you see Mike's text? Carter looked up, brow furrowing. Yeah. Ignore it. People talk. But Julian paced the living room, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows. Maybe he's right. I dragged you into this without thinking about how it looks. You're doing me this massive favor, and now everyone assumes. He trailed off, unable to finish. Carter stood, crossing the room in 2 strides. Hey, stop. I agreed because I wanted to. You're my best friend, Julian. This isn't one-sided. The sincerity in his voice should have eased the tension, but instead it amplified the confusion swirling in Julian's chest. Carter's hand brushed his arm, warm and steady, and Julian stepped back instinctively. The next few days carried an undercurrent of strain. At work, a colleague mentioned hearing the news, with a knowing wink, and Julian forced a smile while inside, he questioned every decision. Carter tried to lighten the mood with takeout from their favorite spot and stories about his latest project, but the easy rhythm they had built felt fragile. One night, over Chinese food on the couch, Carter set his container down. Talk to me. What's really going on? Julian hesitated, then admitted the fear that had been building. What if this changes us? What if I'm asking too much and you end up resenting me? Carter listened quietly, then reached over, taking Julian's hand without pretense this time. We've been through worse. Remember finals week when I pulled that all-nighter for your presentation? This is just another chapter. The words helped, but the seed of doubt remained. Julian threw himself into work, staying late to avoid the apartment's charged atmosphere. Meanwhile, Carter's own questions simmered. He had entered the arrangement expecting a simple favor, but the more time he spent playing the part, the more the lines blurred in his own mind. Late one evening, after Julian had gone to bed, Carter sat alone in the living room, sketchpad open but untouched. He had always admired Julian's quiet strength, the way he balanced family loyalty with his career ambitions. But lately, the touches, the shared laughs, the way Julian looked at him during their practice moments, stirred something deeper. Carter had dated women in college, but nothing ever felt quite right. Now, with Julian so close, he wondered if he had been questioning his own identity all along without realizing it. A loyal friend from their circle, Sarah, noticed the shift during a casual coffee meetup in Logan Square. You two seem different lately, she said, stirring her latte. In a good way. But if this is real, I'm happy for you. Just don't let family pressure mess it up. Her words landed like validation and warning at once. Julian smiled, but later told Carter about the conversation. She thinks it's real, he said quietly. Carter met his eyes across the kitchen counter. Maybe parts of it are. The statement hung there, heavy with possibility, before they both retreated to safer topics. The friendship that had always been their anchor now felt like uncharted water, each wave of emotion pulling them further from shore. Societal pressures crept in too. At a work happy hour, Julian overheard colleagues whispering about alternative lifestyles in the industry, and the old fear resurfaced. He had hidden for so long to protect his career and family ties, but Carter's presence made the hiding feel impossible. One weekend, they drove to Carter's parents' house in the suburbs for a barbecue, maintaining the act for consistency. Carter's family welcomed Julian warmly, no questions asked, their easy acceptance a stark contrast to Julian's own. Watching Carter laugh with his dad over the grill, Julian felt a pang of envy and longing. What would his own parents say if they knew the truth behind the lie? Back home, the tension peaked during a late-night talk. Julian finally voiced the fear that had been building. I keep thinking about what happens when we stop pretending. Will we just go back to how it was? Carter set his book aside, expression serious. Do you want to go back? The question echoed in the quiet apartment. Julian didn't have an answer, but the silence spoke volumes. They went to bed that night with words left unsaid, the distance between them on the couch feeling wider than ever. Yet in the darkness, Julian reached out instinctively, his hand finding Carter's in the space between. Neither pulled away, and for the first time, the touch felt like a promise rather than a performance. The following week brought a small betrayal that tested their fragile balance. A distant cousin posted an old photo from the wedding with a caption questioning if the new couple was too good to be true, tagging mutual friends. The comments flooded in, some supportive, others skeptical. Julian's phone buzzed nonstop. He confronted Carter in the apartment, voice rising. This is getting out of hand. People are digging now. Carter remained calm, but hurt flickered in his eyes. I'm not the one who started this, Julian. But I'm here for it. The argument ended in uneasy silence, both retreating to their rooms. Julian lay awake, regret heavy in his chest. Carter had sacrificed time, reputation, even potential dates, all for loyalty. And here Julian was, pushing him away out of fear. The next morning, Carter made coffee as usual, sliding a mug across the counter with a small smile. We're in this together, right? Julian nodded, the simple gesture mending the rift. They spent the day running errands, the normalcy a bomb. Yet beneath it, Julian's journey of self-discovery deepened. He began reading articles about identity and acceptance late at night, the words resonating in ways he had long denied. Carter noticed the change, offering quiet support without pressure. Their friendship, once simple, was evolving into something richer, more vulnerable. As the city outside hummed with its usual energy, Julian realized the biggest conflict wasn't the lie anymore. It was the truth growing between them, demanding to be acknowledged. The secret began to unravel on a crisp autumn evening when Julian's brother, visiting from out of town, dropped by the apartment unannounced. Mark had always been the golden child, married with kids, living the life their parents dreamed of. He took one look at the way Carter and Julian moved around each other in the kitchen, preparing dinner with familiar ease, and his expression darkened. So this is real? He asked, voice low after Carter stepped out for a moment. Julian froze, the lies suddenly feeling paper-thin. Of course it is, he replied, but Mark wasn't convinced. I saw the way you look at him. But if you're just using this to hide, you better come clean before it blows up in your face. The words landed like a warning shot. Julian brushed it off, but the seed of doubt Mark planted grew overnight. The next day at work, stress mounted as a big project deadline loomed. Carter texted supportively, but Julian's replies were short. That evening, they attended a neighborhood block party, maintaining the act for neighbors who had seen their posts. Laughter filled the street, lanterns glowing against the darkening sky, but Julian felt distant. When Carter pulled him into a gentle hug for a group photo, the embrace felt both comforting and confining. Later, walking home along the tree-lined sidewalk, Carter broke the silence. You've been quiet. Talk to me. Julian hesitated, then shared his brother's visit. Carter listened, then stopped under a street lamp. Your family's expectations aren't your whole story, Julian. Neither is this pretense. The conversation opened a door, but the real turning point came during a surprise family video call the following weekend. Julian's parents joined from Chicago, his mother beaming about future plans. When are you boys coming for Thanksgiving? We want to get to know Carter better. The pressure built until Mark, on the call too, muttered something about convenient timing. The comment hung awkwardly, and after the call ended, Julian paced the apartment. Carter watched him, concern etched on his face. We can stop anytime. I'll back whatever you choose. But stopping felt impossible now. The fake relationship had become the only space where Julian felt seen. A betrayal struck hard the next week. Sarah, their loyal friend, accidentally let slip to Mark during a chance meeting that the relationship had started as a favor. Mark, protective of the family image, confronted Julian via text with screenshots of old messages Sarah had shared in confidence. This is a game to you? Mom and Dad deserve the truth. Julian stared at the phone, betrayal burning hot. He showed Carter the messages, voice shaking. She promised she wouldn't say anything. Carter's face paled, but he stayed calm. We handle this together. No more hiding from each other at least. They spent the night talking through options, the conversation raw and honest. Carter admitted his own growing feelings, how the pretense had forced him to confront parts of himself he had ignored. Julian listened, heart racing, the admission mirroring his own turmoil. The confrontation with his family loomed like a storm cloud. Julian decided to fly home alone for a weekend, leaving Carter in Chicago. The drive from the airport to his parents' house felt endless. At dinner, the truth spilled out in halting words. It started as fake, but it's not anymore. His father's disappointment was immediate, his mother's tears silent. Mark sat silent, the betrayal complete. Julian left the house that night with a heavy heart, the family acceptance he craved slipping away. Back in the apartment, Carter waited with open arms, no judgment. You faced it. That's huge. Their embrace lingered, emotional walls cracking under the weight of truth. The turning point solidified during a quiet evening walk along the Chicago River. The city lights reflected on the water as Julian stopped, turning to Carter. I can't go back to pretending this is nothing. These feelings, they're real. Carter's response was a soft kiss, not for show, but full of the months of built-up emotion. It was gentle, full of promise, and in that moment, the societal pressures and family expectations faded. They had sacrificed secrecy, faced misunderstanding, and now stood on the edge of something authentic. Julian's journey of identity had led him here, to a man who had been his anchor all along. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, he felt ready to walk it. Yet challenges remained. Work colleagues whispered, and Julian's family calls grew distant. Carter supported him through it, his loyalty unwavering even as his own questions about identity surfaced. They attended a local LGBTQ support event together, the experience both terrifying and liberating. Julian watched Carter engage with others, pride swelling. Their bond, forged in pretense, had become the foundation for real growth. Misunderstandings had tested them. The secret reveal had forced honesty, and now sacrifice loomed as Julian considered coming out fully at work despite the risks. The big turning point arrived without warning on a snowy December morning. Julian received a call from his sister, voice strained. Dad's in the hospital. Chest pains. He keeps asking for you. The drive through slushy Chicago streets felt eternal, Carter beside him in the passenger seat, silent support steady as always. At the hospital, the family gathered in tense silence. Julian's father, pale in the bed, looked up and reached for his hand. Son, I was wrong to push so hard. Life's too short. The words cracked something open in Julian. He glanced at Carter waiting outside the room, the man who had stood by him through every lie and revelation. In that moment, Julian made a decision. No more half-truths. Later that evening, back home, Julian turned to Carter. I'm telling them everything. The whole truth, including how real this has become. Carter nodded, eyes shining with pride. I'm with you. The conversation with his family over video the next day was raw. Tears flowed, accusations flew, but underneath was love struggling to break through. Mark apologized for the betrayal, his voice thick. I thought I was protecting you. Julian accepted it, the rift beginning to heal. The sacrifice came when Julian turned down a major promotion at work that required travel, choosing instead to stay close to Carter and his family during the recovery period. This matters more, he told his boss, the decision freeing in its honesty. The emotional climax built slowly over the following weeks. Holiday lights twinkled across the city as Julian and Carter hosted a small gathering in their apartment. Friends and a few reconciled family members filled the space with laughter. Yet beneath the joy, Julian wrestled with the final piece, fully embracing his identity without apology. Carter noticed, pulling him aside in the kitchen. You've grown so much. I'm proud of you. The words unlocked the last barrier. Julian kissed him then, in front of everyone, a public declaration that silenced any remaining doubts. The room erupted in cheers, the moment cinematic in its simplicity and power. Challenges lingered, but they faced them side by side. Societal stares in public became opportunities for quiet defiance. Family dinners grew warmer, traditional expectations softening into acceptance. Carter's own journey mirrored Julian's, his questions about love and self leading to deeper commitment. They took a weekend trip back to the California beach where it all began, walking hand in hand as waves crashed nearby. The happiness was real, earned through every misunderstanding, every sacrifice, every truth confronted. As the new year approached, their bond stood stronger than any pretense could have built. Julian looked at Carter across the apartment, the man who had started as a shield and become his everything. The journey had changed them both, teaching that love, even born from a lie, could lead to the most authentic acceptance. They had grown, not despite the challenges, but because of them. The snow fell softly outside their Chicago apartment as Julian and Carter stood on the balcony, wrapped in one blanket against the winter chill. Months had passed since the hospital visit and the family reconciliation, yet every day still felt like a new chapter in the story they had written together. Julian's father had recovered fully, and weekly calls now included genuine questions about their lives. His mother even sent recipes marked for my boys, the small gestures healing old wounds. Carter's design career flourished, his latest project featuring subtle nods to their shared journey in its colors and lines. Society's pressures had not vanished, but they no longer defined them. At work, Julian had come out officially, earning respect from colleagues who admired his courage. Their days blended into a rhythm of quiet joy. Mornings brought coffee and planning. Evenings shared walks along the frozen lakefront where they talked about dreams without filters. The friendship that once anchored them had transformed into a partnership built on honesty and growth. Julian often reflected on the desperate lie that started it all, amazed at how it had led to this. Carter would catch him staring and smile, knowing the thoughts without words. "No regrets?" he asked one night, pulling Julian close. "None," Julian replied, the answer coming from the deepest part of him. They traveled again to California for a quiet anniversary of that first wedding weekend, the beach now familiar and comforting. Standing in the same spot where the pretense had first felt real, they exchanged simple promises under the sunset. No grand gestures, just two men choosing each other every day. Family visited occasionally, the traditional expectations replaced by warm acceptance. Carter's parents welcomed Julian fully, their support unwavering. The rifts with friends had mended, Sarah apologizing and becoming one of their strongest allies. The journey had tested every relationship, revealing who truly stood by them. As they returned to Chicago, the city lights welcoming them home, Julian felt a profound sense of peace. The man who had hidden for years now walked openly, identity embraced, love celebrated. Carter had been the catalyst, his loyalty turning a favor into forever. They faced the future with open hearts, ready for whatever challenges or joys lay ahead. The emotional growth had been hard-won, each decision and consequence shaping them into stronger versions of themselves. True or false, fake relationships can lead to the most authentic love?